Alright, patch 3.2, new Ascendancy build ideas for the Templar. Let's go. So, Templar is pretty much my plan for the start of this league, specifically Heirophant, so I'm going to be starting off with actually 3 different Heirophant setups, kind of a progression of my plan for what my build is going to start as and what it's going to turn into, because I want to do some mapping, but then I also want to push into boss killing and racing for that Uber Elder and all that stuff. So we've got 3 different setups there, and then afterwards I'm going to show a Guardian Whispering Ice setup, which is pretty much the one I played in the last league, but updated with one of the new Ascendancy nodes, which is really nice for it. First things first, the baseline Hierophant totem build, the mapper, the speed farmer, the freeze pulse totems. So this one is a map farmer. This is what I'll be using to progress through my atlas at the start of the league and grind up to the high level maps and get all that XP and that good stuff. And it should have no problem killing bosses either, but it's definitely going to shine on just clearing through the maps quickly. So you can see it's freeze pulse. We are sitting at about 83k DPS with 4 totems, which puts us at around 330k DPS for bosses. This is for standard map boss. As far as the defensive stats, just over 5k life, 3k mana, so combined 8k total with a 60-40 split on the MOM. And then a juicy 1500 energy shield, which a more realistic number might be somewhere lower, around 1100, 1200, depending on what kind of ES gear you end up with, because you're probably not going to end up with all tier 1 ES bases very early on. I mean, you can see it's a pretty tanky build. The life regen and mana regen are actually kind of low here because Path of Building has support for the new Ascendancies, but it doesn't have full support for all the stats, and one of them being the Heirophant one where you get life regen and mana regen per totem. That's not working, so there is quite a bit of regen missing there, which helps you stay alive even better. But let's hop into the items. We got a Bright Beak, Go Fast, pretty self-explanatory. Spell crit shield with some life and some res. Mind Spiral for the helmet. Gives you 8% damage taken gained as mana, which basically acts as mitigation and a buffer for our mana, since we don't have quite enough mana to keep up with our life pool when we get hit with our current split between Mind over Matter. That helps to mitigate it. And then it also has 113 mana and some cold damage, so it's pretty nice. Body armor, I've got a Vol Regalia, just with some life, some mana, some ES. I didn't put any suffixes on it since there's a pretty high chance you're going to have a Tabula for quite a while with this character. Tabula works just fine. You don't really need any stats on your body armor, because as you can see, my resists are doing just fine without any there. Gloves, life, mana, attack speed, so you're faster. Boots, you're going for the normal move speed, whatever, with a crit chance if you haven't crit recently enchantment. This one works really well for totems, since when the totems crit, it doesn't count as you critting, so you keep the bonus. And additionally, new Heirophant is able to generate power charges without needing a power charge on crit Orb of Storm setup, so you don't have a pesky Orb of Storms proccing crits and ruining your enchant from your boots. On the amulet, you got life, crit multi, some res, some crafted crit chance. The rings are life, mana, res. Belt, Darkness Enthroned. Gotta get those Abyss Jewels for the big DPS bonuses that they provide. Pretty much just the best DPS belt there is. All the flasks are magic flasks. You could sneak in a dying, or not a dying sun, but a wise oak in place of either the mana flask or the basalt flask if you really want to push the DPS higher, but I don't think you'll need it, so I'm going with the safety of having all of those flasks. And then the jewels, I've got 2 with cast speed, crit multi-life. You've got 2 of your first snow jewels to get your freezing pulse projectiles and all that good stuff. And then a spirited response jewel, which does the same thing as the mind spiral, where if you have 40 int in the radius, 10% of damage is taken as mana, or is gained as mana over 4 seconds while you have rallying cry. And rallying cry lasts a really long time, especially if you link it to increased duration. So we've got a combined 18% of any damage we take from a hit is going to be gained back as mana over 4 seconds. So that really helps with mana sustain when you're getting chunked down by spooky packs or bosses or what have you. For the skills, Freeze Pulse Totem with the Cold Pen, Control Destruction, Crit Strike, Hypothermia. You're going to probably not be running either Hypothermia or Cold Pen while you're actually running maps. You're going to have faster projectiles in there. But for bosses, when you feel like you need the DPS, this is the setup you're going to want to go with. Just you'll swap out your faster proj. And then Shield Charge, standard stuff, Lightning Golem with Rallying Cry, and your duration. Again, the Rallying Cry is for getting the Jewel buff, and then Rallying Cry also gives you a bunch of damage and mana regen on its own, so that's really nice. Castle Name and Shaken Immortal Call setup, throwing in the Vol Haste since it fits in there. And then the second utility set up with Flame Dash, Elemental Weakness, faster casting, Arcane Surge. For the tree, pretty straightforward, like most crit totem spell builds. You're kind of just traveling around, grabbing Mind Over Matter and Ancestral Bond, and then just getting life, mana, and whatever damage you pass by while you attempt to get all the crit available to you. So you've got Totem Crit, Witch Crit, Shadow Crit, and the top left Templar Crit, and then you're pretty much good to go for all your damage. The only thing missing on this tree right now that you could potentially get is Throat Seeker, but you would either need more levels or you would have to drop something like Life Nodes, or since I actually stole this tree from my Dark Pact build, I can just drop these 3 Area of Effect nodes because they don't actually do anything for me. We'll drop that, we'll drop those. Get Throat Seeker. There we go. Alright, now we're at a solid 92k DPS, even better, what do you know? Optimizing builds on the fly. Gained another 10,000 damage. No big deal. Looking pretty good. We'll save that. Alright. So for leveling the build, though, you're not going to want to use Freeze Pulse Totems. They are not very good until probably somewhere in the 60s. Bare minimum, you're going to need the 2 jewels. And you're not really just going to have the damage to make it worth using over something like Flame Blast Totems. My plan is, for pure leveling from the start, as soon as you get Firestorm, you're using Firestorm. I like to do self-cast Firestorm plus a Firestorm totem until mid to late Act 3. And then you can grab dual totem, go dual Firestorm totems. When you hit level 28, you swap in Flame Blast totem for bosses, but you don't use Flame Blast totem to clear trash yet. I like to swap to Flame Blast totem for trash somewhere towards the end of Act 5, start of Act 6. When you get that Silver Flask from Act 5, it really helps because you need a lot of cast speed. You need things like Mental Rapidity. You need things like the Silver Flask for Flame Blast Totem to just expand fast enough and pop fast enough. Otherwise, you just stick to the Firestorm until the Flame Blasts feel good. And that'll carry you all the way to pretty much Blood Aqueducts, which is where you're going to be grinding and switching over to the Freezing Pulse setup, and then you're pretty good to go. So on to the next thing. Once I've got my map grinding done, we're all good to go. It is time to do boss farming. And we are going to do that with Dark Pact Totems. This one is, you can still map with Dark Pact Totems. It works fine. It's just not quite as fast as something like Freeze Pulse. But it shines very well against bosses. You can see we've gone from the 90k DPS provided by the Freeze Pulse totems to 243k, and again times 4 totems, so we're much higher on the damage. And pretty much just as safe. We lose a little bit of mana, we gain a bunch of life, so it almost balances out. For the gear, most of it's the same, other than you've got a actual damage weapon, not just a bright beak. And I've put in a Shaper body armor with the base crit chance. This lets us drop the crit strikes gem for now, since we can fit in better support gems. Got some fingerless gloves again, the same. Amulets the same. The rings are pretty much the same. I think I threw cast speed on one of them. And then we're switching like cold damage on jewels to chaos damage. Other than that, the gear is mostly the same. You're just looking for life, res, mana, and spell crit stats. And then this damage is with some wither stacks, but not maxed out. We're at 5. It's kind of hard to realistically get up to 10 and 15 stacks against bosses a lot of the time, at least the harder bosses. But if you can manage to get up to maxed stacks, you're looking at 350k per totem, so it's even higher. You're well over 1 million DPS total right now. But our standard setup, 5 stacks, is pretty reasonable. Puts us just under 1 million with all 4 totems, which is good enough. We can kill just about anything still with that. So for the links that are making this happen, we got Dark Pact, Concentrated Effect, Void Manipulation, the Spell Totem, Controlled Destruction, Added Chaos. We have our Despair Curse with our Golem, our other utility stuff, Faster Casting, Flame Dash, Wither, which is the big boy here, linked up to Faster Casting and Arcane Surge. Arcane Surge is very important because we actually have switched our Heirophant tree a little bit on this one. And then Increased Duration, which works with both the Arcane Surge and the Wither itself. Same cast and damage of all haste setup, same shield charge setup. But when we go to the tree, you'll see I've dropped the Divine Guidance node, which is why our mana is lower, which is why our HP is higher, because we're changing the split there. And instead, I've opted in on the Illuminated Devotion node, which actually isn't working right now. So we're missing a little bit of damage here, 40 spell damage. It's not a huge deal. It would probably give another 10k tooltip on the sheet, but what's really cool about it is, since we're pretty much going to have Arcane Surge all the time, 25 AoE is huge, the spell damage is good, and then the leech will apply to your totems, which sounds bad because it's not you getting the leech, but you do have Dark Pact totems that are nuking themselves, so I think giving them the leech to keep them alive longer against bosses could end up being really nice to have. So I'm looking forward to see how that works out. And then as far as, you don't really have to level this one. Like I said, this is a respec from the Freeze Pulse setup. The tree is mostly the same. We've skipped out on this section right here since we're not elemental. I didn't want to travel through that. Instead we go down, we get Totemic Mastery, which is a really good wheel for all the damage, and the Totem Life, which basically gives us damage. Get a little bit of the Scion Life, and then we grab some Chaos damage up here with Atrophy. Very efficient and gives some cast speed and all that good stuff. But the rest of the tree is mostly the same. Doesn't really change too much. And this will hopefully allow me to farm up some endgame bosses, maybe some low tier Elder Guardians to get the first sets of those done. But the big thing I'm gunning for on this character is I want to be able to kill Ziri with it. I've done some practice runs with a similar setup and it worked fine. So as long as I don't misplay, it should be doable on hardcore. On softcore, it's easily Ziri viable. Very easily. Like, you might die once or twice when you know what you're doing. And then the goal of that is to get the upgraded Ziri's mirror so we can switch to the high budget version, which is again Dark Pact totems, but we've swapped out some things. This is the full endgame setup. We've got the upgraded Ziri's mirror here, which is reduced effective curses by 100%. You're completely unaffected, which lets you run Soul Mantle and Self-Flagellation for a massive damage boost, a big totem life boost, and an extra totem. And all in all, we go from, if I swap this back down to the same 5 Wither stacks, we have gone from 240-ish thousand at 4 totems to 370 at 5 totems. So we're gaining, it's somewhere in the neighborhood of like 70-ish% more DPS than the previous Dark Pact setup, just from like basically swapping out a few items. The hard thing is that the mirror, you have to kill Ziri to get it, so it's pretty rough to get set up and going. But like you saw, if you're maxed out on Wither stacks, this character is insane. You're looking at 2.5 million DPS with a combined life mana pool of about 7,500, and then another 1k plus ES. So total HP pool is still over 8,000. You're going to have a lot of life regen, a lot of mana regen, and you're just going to melt pretty much everything in existence. And hopefully this is what I will be able to use to push down the new Uber Elder fight. Hopefully be the first to do it. We'll see. But the gear is pretty much the exact same as the last Dark Pact setup, other than the body armor swapping, the shield swapping, and the 1 jewel swapping. I've got 1 jewel here that I had put in on this character to see what the regen looked like with the new Heirophant stuff that isn't currently working. But the tree is the exact same. The skills are, some are missing since I didn't put in all the utility stuff. But the skills are the exact same. It just hits a lot harder. And that pretty much covers my Heirophant plans. Should be fun. Should be really strong. Should be really safe. But we got one more bonus for you. And that is Guardian Whispering Ice. So I imported my character that I had played during Abyss into here, just straight up added him in. And this build is pretty much unchanged. 3 out of your 4 big nodes are the same. You're getting Unwavering Faith. You're getting Time of Need. The only swap is that previously you would have Bastion of Hope because Harmony of Purpose didn't really do anything for you. But we're dropping this guy. We're grabbing this guy. It has 10% chance to gain a Power, Frenzy, or Endurance charge on hit, which for pretty much any Guardian build while you're clearing maps, that's amazing because you're hitting tons of trash mobs. You're going to be maxed out on charges. But for bosses, I don't think a lot of builds will be able to make as much use out of it as this Whispering Ice character does, because with Whispering Ice, you were just spamming so many hits that you will have no problem whatsoever being capped out on all 3 charges, even fighting bosses, when previously the build had 0 charges. You can see right here, I ticked them all on. Before we were at about 22.8k average damage. Putting on the frenzy charges is going to be 12% more damage. So that's the first thing we're gaining, is 12% more damage. Second thing we're gaining is the power charges, so the crit chance is going to go up from 5 to 8.5. And that's going to help a lot for keeping Elemental Overload active more consistently, because it does drop occasionally now, but with this new crit chance, it should be up pretty much permanently. And then the endurance charge is self-explanatory, even more mitigation on a character that was already insanely tanky and able to face tank most of Shaper's Guardians and pretty much every single Elder Guardian and the Elder fight. And it's even tankier now. So that's a really beneficial change for this character. I do have a guide, a full guide for this character available. I'll link the video in the description if you want to see that guide. The build is, be warned, not a map clearing build at all. This is a very specialized boss farming, just like a different style of boss farming, but the map clearing is slow. If you want a boss farmer, it works. It's going to be extremely powerful this league, I think. It might even rival the low life Righteous Fire setups, since they aren't going to benefit as much from the charge generation changes. They won't be able to proc them all as easily. And I think it's going to be a really top tier setup for that stuff once you're able to get all the gear going. But yeah, that covers the Templar in 3.2, I would say. Not going to bother with Inquisitor. Basically unchanged. If you had an Inquisitor build you wanted to do before, it's going to be the same now. Should be fine. But yeah, hope you guys enjoyed the video as always. Thanks for watching, and I will see you all next time.